Welcome back to the Ice Vision podcast, bringing you recaps of this past weekend of hockey and what an exciting weekend it was. We had the Avalanche and Stars Game 7, the Blues and Jets Game 7, and Canada winning gold medal at the World U18 Championships. Back-to-back wins, might I add. So absolutely unreal. And we're going to start right with that, with Canada winning the U18 World Championships, because this was obviously the games and the tournament that I've been paying the most attention to over the weekend. So yeah, let's get right into it. Obviously, last time we had talked, Canada was just going in to play against Slovakia, which they won that game 4-0, shutout for Jack Ivankovic, and then dominant in the final against Sweden, where they won 7-0. Again, another shutout for Jack Ivankovic. This tournament has absolutely shot him up draft boards for sure, I would think. He was already considered probably a three or fourth best goaltender in this draft class, but now he's probably number one, I would think. He was so good, so dominant for Canada all the way through the tournament, the clear best goalie at this tournament, and may very well be the best goalie in this draft class. Could be a late first, if not an early second round pick. It'd be tough to say because size is a consideration for him. He's very athletic goalie, very positionally sound. He's great at both aspects of the position for sure, but he's 5'11, and that's kind of opposite of the trend for goaltenders in the NHL. Obviously, we expect these like 6'4" athletic monsters to be out there in net, but obviously a guy like UC Saros has been dominant for years in the NHL. Not so much this year, but he's old and the team wasn't very good. But yeah, absolutely a guy that's 5'11 can still be good. Dustin Wolf's another example of a guy who just entered the league, bit of a smaller guy, but still a very good goaltender overall. So yeah, I think Ivan Kovic is going to be a great goalie for whoever picks him up. The jury's out on whether he'll be a starter or not. Obviously, it's very tough to judge goalies at the draft, and it's been really hard these last couple of years. Very few of the goalies taken the last couple of years have really panned out. But obviously, his track record is pretty good. And especially with Canada, he's got like 6 gold medals or something like that, and that's on top of being a very good goalie at in the OHL level for a long portion of time. So yeah, shout out to him. And then another big part of Canada's success was their decor. Now, we talked about it a bit last episode, but they have a very mobile, offensive focused decor. Xavier Villeneuve, we talked about a lot. Some of you probably saw the short that might have brought you to this episode of the podcast where I talked a little bit about Villeneuve. But yeah, just an absolutely unreal player. The way he moves, just agile on his skates and can just break opponents' ankles, whether it's with his hands or whether it's using his skating. So strong on his edges, so hard to knock off the puck despite only being 5'8", and he's got a great shot and he's not scared to use it, and he creates a ton of offense. And he was probably not even Canada's best defenseman at the tournament. He's just one of the most exciting in my opinion, because you got a guy like Keaton Verhoff, another 2026 defenseman, is 6'4" and just great in all situations for Canada. He was late showing up. Obviously, his Victoria Royals were still competing in the playoffs when the tournament started. But when the playoffs ended for him, he came over for the tournament and was very good for the team. Probably their most used defenseman in all situations, maybe outside of Jackson Smith, who is the oldest on this decor and 2025 eligible player, who was also very good for Canada. And then Ryan Lynn as well, another 2026 eligible defenseman, great puck mover, great skater, stepped into more of a defensive role, was more of a shutdown role, and was a top penalty killer for Canada, and just a great job. But the key, and what I'm trying to emphasize here, is mobile, strong skaters on the decor. Every single one of these guys can skate the puck. Every single one of those guys can dish the puck. They have offensive focus to their games most of the time. Now, some of them had to step into more of a defensive role, but they were able to do that because they had such good tools that make them such good offensive players and were able to just apply it to the defensive end. And this is something that I've been trying to emphasize for years with Team Canada. We keep thinking, especially at the U20 championships, we got to take these shutdown guys, these big 6'6" shutdown guys, or these slow moving but punishing shutdown defenseman types. And we try to do this year over year at the U20 championships. And to mix success for sure, obviously we can get by on our talent alone a little bit, but especially this past year, I mean, we took one puck mover, maybe two, but one puck mover for sure, and Matthew Schaefer, and he got injured 4 periods into the tournament. So obviously it's not enough. And I'm hoping now that at the U18 championships we just saw how important it is to have such strong skaters on your decor. I'm hoping that means the U20 championships going forward, Canada is going to continue to bring those strong skaters, those strong offensive players from the back end, because it just opens up your game so much. It's why Canada was so dominant even though they didn't always put the puck in the back of the net as much as probably the commentators thought they should have, or I thought they should have, or anything like that. They controlled play so well. And it was because every time the puck was on their stick, they were able to either skate the puck out of the danger areas and then make a pass to clean breakout and get the puck up ice. And then even in the offensive zone, when the defenseman got the puck, they were able to keep it in under control and under pressure and just keep up the pressure on the opposing teams, making it very hard for them to compete. And I think that's the success going forward for Canada. We are still the most skilled nation in hockey. We just have to start taking our most skilled players to these tournaments. And this U18 World Championships was a step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. Um, Speaking of the decor, we talked about Villeneuve, Ryan Lynn, Keaton Verhoff. All these guys are 2026 eligibles. All of them will also be available for the Lincoln Gretzky in August, which is typically the tournament where Canada takes the stronger team because we don't have our playoffs going on at the time, our junior hockey playoffs. And that's pretty exciting to think about, considering you also are going to have reinforcements likely in the form of Landon DuPont, who might be better than all of these guys already, despite being a year younger. Plus, Gavin McKenna will be available, who's the best player in this age group for sure. So that is very exciting. Keep posted for that in August when the Linky Gretzky comes around, because Canada is likely going to dominate and come away with another gold there if we take the level of players that we've been taking to these tournaments lately. Moving on, talk a little bit about Sweden as well. Or no, sorry. Before we get to that, I just want to shout out Brady Martin. Again, we talked about him last tournament and last podcast about just the physical presence he's been for Canada, but he still has that skilled side to his game that really contributes to the offense and everything. He's not just a one-dimensional grinder. He is like a true first, second line offensive talent that can bring you a ton of physicality as well to your lineup. So you think about teams in the NHL like Carolina, a team like Florida, even like Tampa, teams that are very skilled but play an extremely physical game. Trying to think, St. Louis is another team. They were a playoff team. We'll talk about them a little bit more, but very good skilled teams that still play with a very much a physical edge to them. And you look at a guy like Sam Bennett for Florida and how he's contributed so much to that roster and made them contenders. Brady Martin is that style of player. He can contribute offensively, but he's also one of the best hitters in junior hockey right now. I know Cam Robinson from Elite Prospects, he's tweeted out he was talking with a couple of NHL scouts at the tournament, and they think like fundamentally wise, his hitting ability is on par with an NHL player's already, if not would be one of the best in the NHL. And Martin's not necessarily a big guy, but he hits hard. Obviously, if you were watching the tournament, you probably saw in the Slovakia game he actually got a 5-minute major like 2 minutes into the game. It was a late hit for sure, and they did the whole song and dance, brought the stretcher out for the Slovakia player, and then he was back right away for the power play. So I mean, they definitely sold it a little bit, which is probably why he got kicked out. But I mean, it's just because of how violent and how hard he can hit players that that's something that I think these international players, especially Sweden and Slovakia, aren't necessarily used to the physicality at that level, right? I mean, I know some of them do definitely play in professional leagues, but still, the physicality isn't as high as you'd see in like junior hockey here for sure. And a guy like Brady Martin can be a bit of an eye opener for that, which is definitely why. And then the IHF rule book as well. They're a lot more less worried about throwing around 5-minute majors, I'll say, to put it nicely, we'll say. But I mean, that's the tournament rules, right? We can't complain too much about the rule book. We have to conform to that rule book if we want to compete there, right? So but anyways, I just wanted to shout out Martin because he was very good at the tournament. I got a little bit off track there, but yeah, he was very good for Canada. He was definitely a coming out party. I could definitely see him jumping into the top 10 at this year's draft. I know I say that about a lot of guys, but absolutely the tournament he had, plus the way he ended the season, and just his overall set is built for the NHL. He will be a successful player in the NHL. Is he going to be a star? Is he going to be a Hart Trophy candidate? No. Is he going to be a very productive second liner, potential first line winger? Absolutely. So, he's your very much high floor, low ceiling type of player that is like you're fine taking in the top 10 of a draft because you're going to get a good player. So, yeah, shout out Brady Martin. And I mean, there's so many other players we could talk about. Braden Coots had a great tournament, great two-way presence for Canada as their captain as well, and just great playmaking, very productive for the team overall. And then Cole Reshney, Keaton Veroff's teammate, came over at the same time when the Royals were done in the playoffs. Was also just very good for Canada. Was arguably their best offensive player once he finally got there, and just a great a great dual threat offensive player. He's got great playmaking ability. He's got a great shot and can score at will. It seems like so. Yeah, and all these guys like Coots and Reshny are both 2020 or 2025 eligibles, and I think both of them definitely boosted their draft stock a little bit with their performance at this year's tournament. So that's exciting as well. But yeah, talking about the team Canada played, Sweden. Sweden, a bit of a disappointing final. Obviously, they were the best offensive team in the tournament. They had the best power play going into the final. Looked like they were going to be a real struggle for Canada to beat. Obviously, they looked very convincing when they beat the U.S. in the semifinals. Um, but, they just, it seemed like they weren't prepared for what was coming, or yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say. Canada definitely played their best game in the final, and I think maybe it was just a talent gap alongside just the general play style. Canada just held possession too much, and Sweden couldn't break through. But I mean, there's some disappointment for some of their top players too. Anton Frundell had the skill set, and he probably should have been the best forward at this tournament. He's a potential top 5 pick in this year's draft. But you have to remember too, he just got finished with the playoffs in Sweden with his club. I'm not going to try and say his club's name, but in the Hockey Allsvenskan League, which is tier 2 professional in Sweden. And so they won their league, are getting promoted to tier 1 now in Sweden's professional hockey landscape, and hopped on a plane, was jet lagged basically for the entire tournament, right? So he's not going to perform at his best, but still you wish to see a little bit more, especially from a player of his caliber. But even then, he still showed flashes of it. Obviously, he's such a strong player, like the way he protects the puck and creates scoring chances just by skating and being patient. His two-way upside to his game as well. Like he's a guy that'll be a second line center in the NHL in a very short amount of time for sure. So I thought he did have a or he had a good tournament considering the circumstances, but absolutely, I think Sweden missed the production that they probably could have gotten out of him. On the flip side of that, though, obviously there was some disappointment on Sweden's end, but Philip Ekberg and Sasha Boumedian, they were both named the forward of the tournament or the MVP of the tournament for Ekberg and the defenseman of the tournament for Boumedian, who both had incredible tournaments, both 2025 eligibles. Boumedian led the tournament in defenseman scoring. Ekberg led the tournament in overall scoring. Ekberg also breaking the record for scoring by a Swedish player at this tournament, which is just incredible. Like, good on those guys. You love to see, especially 2025 eligibles, step up at what is basically their last showing before the draft. And both these guys did. Boumedian, obviously, he played for Boston University this year and was a good player for them, but he was a 17-year-old stepping into the NCAA, which is typically dominated by more 19, 20, 21-year-olds. So he was underaged for it, and very rarely do you see a guy like a guy come in and dominate that league unless it's like a Jack Eichel or Macklin Celebrini or something like that as an underager or as a draft year player, right? So Boumedian, for his credit, really did step in and was a very good defenseman for Boston University, but this tournament really showed that for this age group, he's one of the top defensemen in the class. So you wonder if he'll jump up right now. I think going into this tournament, he was probably ranked 5th or 6th as far as defenseman. And you'll see maybe he might jump up into the middle of the first round. Before he was probably like a borderline second round pick, but be interesting to see. And then Philip Ekberg, this is a guy that I think will end up being more of a draft steal just because of his skill set. He's just very skilled. He's a smaller player, a bit undersized, but he's got a ton of skill to his game. Great playmaker, great shot, great hands, and he's a good skater, but he's smaller, right? And I don't know if the hockey IQ is 100% there either, but it's something that can be worked on a bit. And admittedly, I haven't watched a ton of his game. Most of it was just watching him at this tournament. I can't buy subscription services to watch every single league in the world, but a few highlights I have seen, like Ekberg is definitely a very good player, but definitely was a tier below a lot of the other top Swedish players, Victor Eklund, Anton Frundell, for example. But he really showed out in this tournament, was a leading scorer, set a record. So good on him as well. Again, he had a great tournament overall. Obviously, the final game wasn't what he wanted it to be, same for Boumedian for that matter. But overall, great tournament and great showing. Likely boosted his draft stock a bit. If not, some team is going to get a pretty decent steal in the later rounds. I think he's ranked around third, fourth round by most rankings I've seen. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody took a chance on him in the second round just because of the showing he had at this tournament and the fact that he was playing professional this year, right? Not every player steps into those professional European leagues like Anton Frundell and Victor Eklund and dominates right away. So it'll take a guy like Ekberg some time, but I do think there's an NHL player there for sure. And then one other guy to talk about is Ivar Stenberg, who is a 2026 eligible. Right now, I think consensus is he's number 2 overall. I think he's kind of battling with Keaton Veroff for that spot, and Ryan Rubrick, who played for Canada as well. They're all kind of in that top 5 range. Obviously, Gavin McKenna is the runaway first overall pick. Barring like absolute disaster next year, he's going to be the first overall pick in 2026. But Ivar Stenberg had a great tournament as well. Was arguably Sweden's second best player in the final. I thought he was maybe their best player even. But yeah, so that's just a good sign for this 2026 draft year. The 2026 draft season is going to be very interesting to watch because there's a lot of good players across, the CHL, the NCAA, USHL, and especially overseas in Europe. There's quite a few good players. I haven't really had time to talk about it, but um, Adam Nemec, who is Simone Nemec's brother, is another 2026 eligible, and he was a really good player for Slovakia at this tournament and is a projected top 10 pick as far as I know going into that draft. So it's very interesting to see, and this tournament was a great showcase to start for that draft year, and this is really the start of that draft season, and then going into the Link Gretzky, which Canada should have a really good showing at, will be kind of the official start of that draft season. So yeah, again, just in summary, I guess this was a great tournament. It was a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, if you missed it this year, check it out next year. I know it's going on at the same time as the NHL playoffs, but it's a really good hockey. It's all draft eligible guys, draft -1 guys who are going to be in the NHL in the next couple of years. In a lot of ways, you're probably going to see at this tournament a lot more future NHLers than you would at the U20 championships, because the U20s are a lot of guys that have already been drafted and are at certain points in the developmental journey and stuff. And not all of those guys make the NHL. Whereas at this tournament, a lot of these guys are going to be picked in the first round and get a shot in the NHL at the very least. And just go back and look at some of Canada's rosters over the year at this tournament, you'll understand, why this tournament is so important and why you're likely watching some of the future NHL stars play at this tournament. But anyways, yeah, just check out the tournament is what I'm trying to say. But anyways, we got to move on. We got to talk about the NHL playoffs now. Like I said, that Canada U20 game or U18 championship game wasn't the only big game that happened over the weekend because we also had 2 Game 7s. We're going to start with Avalanche Stars. And specifically with the Avalanche and Stars, I want to talk about a guy by the name of Mikko Rantanen, the supposed player that was carried by Nathan MacKinnon through most of his career, according to some Carolina fans and some Colorado fans, and they based that opinion off of a small sample size after Mikko Rantanen left. I can comfortably say, now that Rantanen absolutely dominated through the last 3 games of the series, that he does not need Nathan MacKinnon to produce. He is one of the best players in the league, deserves to get paid like one of the best players in the league. The Avalanche missed out on not paying him, but I'm not saying the Avalanche did bad, but it's definitely not looking great on them right now that they let Rantanen walk, or not even let him walk, traded him away, especially considering it sounds like the difference between the two of them was $250,000 per year, which is nothing. That's a quarter of an entry level contract player. So it doesn't look great on the Avalanche right now. And to their credit, I will say the Avalanche looked really good in this series, and actually 5-on-5, they were probably the better team. The difference was obviously on the power play. The Avalanche struggled. I want to say 1 for 31 or something like that in their last how many playoff games? I can't remember exactly, but the power play hasn't been good in the playoffs the last couple years, but especially this year. And you saw that even in Game 7, they had a couple chances on the power play that didn't go in the net, right? And the Avalanche capitalized, obviously got their chances on the power play, which ended up in the net. And I know there's lots of controversy over some of those calls, like, or maybe it's not controversy. I saw Avalanche fans complaining about it a little bit, though. It's like both of them are penalties, and I get it. In the playoffs, you expect a lot of stuff like to get let go, but in my opinion, I think it's better that the refs call penalties. Like when a ref lets a play go, they are still influencing the game, right? So both of those penalties absolutely were. Cale Makar gets down trying to block a pass. Obviously, he's not intending to trip up. I can't remember who he tripped, but he's not intending to trip the guy up. But nevertheless, he takes away a lane and takes away a scoring opportunity. If he doesn't trip him up, that's a free shot at the net, right? So, in my opinion, that's something that has to be called. And same with the holding penalty late in the period. I mean, the Avalanche player grabs the guys and basically suplexes them. Like, you are going to get a penalty for that. I don't understand why the expectation was that wouldn't be called, but regardless, and I mean, part of it is on the NHL too because they aren't consistent with their officiating in the playoffs. But I think you have to call the penalties, and I hope the fact that those were called, because again, they were both penalties. I hope the fact that those were called is a sign that maybe going forward we're going to be a little more consistent with calling clear infractions in the playoffs, but I do doubt it. I think this was just. I think the frustration stems from how inconsistent things are. And so, from that perspective, I can understand where the frustration comes from the Avalanche fans. But at the end of the day, they were penalties. The Avalanche have to either be more disciplined or be better on the penalty kill because that's just the reality of it. Even the best teams take a couple penalties in the playoffs. They don't give up that many power play goals, right? And especially in this series, I mean, the Stars struggled at 5-on-5 a lot. They were definitely, in a way, caved in at 5-on-5, especially due to their decor, which wasn't great, right? The Avalanche were really good at taking advantage of it, but they were able to make up the difference, one in transition, where they scored a lot of their goals, and two, just on the power play, right? So, you know, at the end of the day, while 5-on-5 is extremely important to winning in the playoffs, the special teams are where you make the difference or you make up that difference. And that's what the Stars did this year, and the Avalanche did not. So, but just to go back to talk about the Mikko Rantanen issues, again, this has been very frustrating for me for most of the season. Rantanen's had a weird year for sure. Started off the season, he was very productive with the Avalanche for most of the year, I thought. But there was always this, cloud hanging over him about the contract dispute, how he wanted a certain amount of money. He wanted to be paid more than McKinnon or whatever. And the Avalanche didn't want to do that. They set kind of this internal cap at where Nathan McKinnon is because he's the best player on the team. Something I disagree with, first of all, because the cap is going up. If the cap was staying static, sure, you set the internal cap as your best player. But when the cap is increasing, that means player salaries also are increasing or should be increasing. Mikko Rantanen is one of the top players in the league, arguably a top 10 player, for sure, top 20 player in the league, deserves to be paid like it. And so when he's asking for 14 million, the Avalanche aren't willing to give it to him, but they're willing to give him like 13.5 or something, and that like the difference is like the 500,000 or 250,000. Give him the extra little bit, especially for a player that's that elite and that good of a player. I don't know why that was such a hang up for them. But again, a lot of it is just rumors. I don't know what the actual hang up was or how far apart they were in terms of numbers, but I did what the most recent rumor I saw was it was like 250,000 was the hang up. And it's like how can you not pay that for a guy that's that good? Yeah, I don't get it. But anyways, Martin Necas is a very good player as well, and he was very good for the Avalanche for most of the season. Struggled in the playoffs a little bit. A bit of a trend with him too, considering he struggled with Carolina in years past. But I mean, who knows, right? Mitch Marner struggled the last couple of years in the playoffs this too, and now this year he's a point a game or over a point a game. So could take a little bit, and Necas could be one of the best playoff performers next year. Who knows, right? But regardless, Mikko Rantanen then goes to Carolina and isn't very productive with them. And that's where this whole perception around him started regarding him just being a product of McKinnon. Now, when your player is talented as Rantanen, and I can tell that anybody who was saying that Rantanen was a product of McKinnon wasn't actually watching the game. The way they were analyzing Rantanen was they were sorting by points scored, and they were seeing that Rantanen didn't score in that small sample size of like 12 games or something. He wasn't very productive, and they were going, well, it must have been Nathan McKinnon that was driving the bus. They weren't actually watching the games. They weren't actually seeing how Rantanen plays. Rantanen's play style is rush focused. It's rush heavy. He's all about getting the puck in a controlled entry, and then that east-west movement, creating lanes for his teammates and stuff, confusion for the defenseman, and then dishing the puck or creating scoring chances for himself. Carolina is a dump and chase, forecheck, and cycle team. It's not a bad style, but it's a style that doesn't really fit with Mikko Rantanen. And that's why he wasn't very productive. Despite that, even then in Carolina, the underlying numbers, stuff like expected goals, shot shares, slot chances creating, Rantanen was still creating all those at a high rate, but the puck wasn't actually going into the net. Now, some of it could just be luck, especially when you see a guy that's creating high danger chances, but the puck's not going in. Sometimes it's just luck, but it could also just be unfamiliarity as well. He's not familiar with the system. He needed to take time to get more acclimated to it. While he was creating the scoring chances, maybe he was just a little off. He was in a bit of the wrong position, or he was receiving the puck a little weird, or he was putting the puck just in the wrong position with his teammates or something like that. Just small things that while he's creating those high danger chances, maybe not resulting in full on, like the puck actually ending up in the back of the net. But that's something you don't give up on a player for. That's something that just takes time to go. Now, I understand Carolina trading him because it sounded like Rantanen was not going to re-sign there, and Carolina didn't want to lose him for nothing. And they did well picking up Logan Stankoven for him, plus a couple other pieces. Stankoven was the big one. So, I mean, I'm not going to, ride Carolina too hard for that. I mean, they took a risk on it, and it didn't pan out. But this idea that Rantanen was lazy in Carolina, or wasn't a good player, or that his time in Carolina proved that he was a product of McKinnon, was always dumb. It was always dumb. It was always really spread by people that weren't watching the game, or at the very least weren't watching with a very critical eye. There's just the type of people that just analyze the game by sorting by the amount of points scored over the last several games, right? You can't take a player's production over a small sample size and use that to evaluate them as an actual player. And I mean, to be clear, for fans, who cares, right? A fan doesn't have to be an expert on the game, but I'm talking there was analysts that were saying this, right? And it made zero sense at the time. Sure enough, Rantanen goes to Dallas, and while he struggled a little bit in Dallas for sure, and the underlying numbers were bad, the underlying numbers for everybody in Dallas were bad because of injuries to guys like Miro Heiskanen and later on Jason Robertson, which really hurt the team, and obviously that carried into the playoffs. I mean, 5-on-5 they weren't great, but my point is that the production came back for Rantanen. Why? Because Dallas is a team that creates offense off the rush. As we've established already, Rantanen is a player that dominates on the rush. He creates a ton of offense off the rush. And so when he goes to a team like Dallas, which has a ton of talent, and has a play style that fits with him, of course he's going to produce more. When he's in a team like Carolina that doesn't produce in the same way that he is typically used to or is at his absolute best doing, and is also a team that, while they have some offensively talented players, definitely, like, there's nobody on Carolina besides maybe Aho that's as good of a player or as good of an offensive player as a Jason Robertson or a Wyatt Johnson, right? So it's just a completely different level of player, and it's a completely different play style, both of which, or one of which, really caters to Rantanen's skill set, and one of which doesn't. And that's the reason he struggled in Carolina. It's the reason he's super successful in Dallas. At the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make is that Rantanen was not a product of McKinnon. Rantanen was not lazy in Carolina, and he proved that in Game 6 and 7, where he had 9 points over the 2 games and was the best player on the ice by far, and ultimately knocked his old team out of the playoffs. Pay the guy. Dallas did it. Obviously, state income tax probably helps a little bit, but at the end of the day, look at the elite player. Look at the elite player for who he is. Understand that he doesn't need anybody to help him perform. He just needs a play style or a system that is catered to his ability, which is pretty much true for any star in the league, and pay the guy what he's worth, right? That is what Colorado should have done. Carolina obviously couldn't re-sign him, but should have recognized that the system they were running probably wasn't ideal for a player like Rantanen. Ultimately, it worked out for Carolina, and Logan Stankoven has been great for them, but the point being that Mikko Rantanen is an elite player, and he absolutely deserves to be talked about like one, not about not being talked about like he was just a running mate to McKinnon, right? Okay, I will stop ranting about Mikko Rantanen now. That's a point of frustration for me if you couldn't tell. St. Louis Blues, Winnipeg Jets, Game 7. Now, I missed the first 2 periods of this game. I was out, but I was able to get back and catch the third period. And to be honest, I thought the Blues were playing very well. They were doing a good job of just controlling the pace of play, controlling the offense, controlling the pressure, and keeping the pressure up on Winnipeg. But they did, especially towards the end of the period, they started to turtle more and more. They started to come back, crash around their net, just try to protect the dangerous areas, which is all right, but you still need to be able to be playing a style of game that gets you possession of the puck. And ultimately, Winnipeg just held possession for too long. Were able to create those dangerous scoring chances. Obviously, they were both redirects that tied the game up. And then going into overtime, again, it was another redirect, right? And just Winnipeg took over. They are a really good team. It's very a well-oiled machine the way they move the puck up ice, get in the zone, set up, and then just funnel the offense through the point and creating those redirects in front and those dangerous chances in the slot off of redirects and rebounds and such. And St. Louis just kind of let them do it towards the end of that period. I understand they were worried and they were trying to hold on to a lead, but that's just what happens, right? There's not much more you can say on that, right? I mean, St. Louis blew it, but regardless, I mean, it's still a great season for the Blues because they were one of the worst teams in the league through the first half of the season. Spun it around, and after the Four Nations were the best team in the league, arguably, at least in the regular season. and they were able to force the playoffs and then force Game 7 against the team that was the best team in the league all season, right? And they made Connor Hellebuck look human, which is just a whole other thing that is very interesting for sure because Hellebuck looked unbeatable for most of the season. Now, there has been a lot of talk now because Hellebuck didn't look good in this first round. There's a bit of a concern going into the round against Dallas. I do think Dallas is probably going to victimize him a little bit in the same way the Blues did because Dallas is arguably a better offensive team and is going to get more high danger chances and just going to be able to pick on the holes that Hellebuck leaves a little more. But one thing I'm curious to see is after the shaky first period Hellebuck had, it looked like he really did lock in for the Blues, and he was doing things like challenging pucks and challenging high danger chances, which is something he doesn't typically do, right? He typically hangs back in the net, gives himself the opportunity to move side to side and prevent those dangerous cross crease passes. It seemed like he was doing a lot more of just straight up challenging those dangerous chances, giving up his opportunity to maybe get across and make a key save, but taking away the holes that he would typically leave with his play style. So interesting to see. I don't know if that's something that's going to continue. It seems like it's a hard adjustment for a goalie to make on the fly, but he obviously did it for this game, and I'm curious to see if that will continue going forward, if he's going to be a little more traditional in the sense that he's going to challenge plays a lot more, and if that will lead to more success. Okay, we're back now. Took a little bit of a break there. And we're going to go in to actually talk about our predictions on round 2 now for the playoffs. So to start off, just kind of where we left off there, we're talking about Stars and Jets. So interesting storyline for this series is, does this have an effect on the U.S.'s goaltending rotation going into the Olympics next year? Now I'm assuming obviously there's going to be a lot more that goes into it, like regular season performance and stuff next year. But this is absolutely going to be some implications, I think. Whichever goalie performs better across from the other one, that's going to stick in people's minds, especially the people picking the team for Team USA. Uh, but yeah, anyways, that's more of just an interesting storyline, not anything to be too worried about, I guess, right away in this series. But it'll be interesting to see if it has an effect on the Olympic team next year. It is going to be a similar series, similar for the last series. For both these teams, it's going to be the elite offense from the Stars versus deep and well structured teams. Obviously, Colorado was a deeper team, or not so much a deeper team, but they were a lot more well structured, a better 5-on-5 team than the Stars were. Similarly, the Jets were probably the deeper team, but they were coming against a very good offensive team in St. Louis, right? So this is going to be very similar. The difference is the Stars are a much better team than St. Louis was, at least on paper. Their offense is significantly better. It should be significantly better. Their players are much better. Their stars are better. There isn't a player in this series that's better than Mikko Rantanen. We've talked enough about him already. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Stars adapt to that. It's also going to be interesting. One of the big storylines for both these teams going into it is the injury issue. Is Miro Heiskanen and Jason Robertson going to be back? Stars coach thinks they're going to be back at some point in the series. He doesn't know when, but he figures they will be. Similarly, what is the status of Mark Scheifele and Josh Morrissey? Now, the scary thing is, especially for the Jets, is they are hurt a lot more without those guys than the Stars are. The Stars, without Jason Robertson, still have two first lines and a second line, in their top nine. The Jets without Mark Scheifele have, Adam Lowry, who's a very good player, a very good third liner, probably a good second liner on a lot of teams, but not a cup winning center, as far as I'm concerned. And so that is a bit concerning. Likewise, Neil Pionk's a great defenseman, but how many more 41-minute performances does he have in him? Can you rely on Neil Pionk to be your number one guy against a team like the Dallas Stars? The saving grace is there's holes in Dallas's lineup, much like there was holes for Colorado to exploit in Dallas's lineup, and that's on the left side, provided Miro Heiskanen doesn't come back, right? You know, a decor of Cody Ceci or a left side of Cody Ceci, Ilya Lyubushkin, and Matt Dumba, I've harped on it enough. That is absolutely terrifying. So it's going to be very interesting to see if Dallas or if the Jets can take advantage of that with Dallas. Likewise, it's going to be interesting to see how Connor Hellebuck performs because Hellebuck struggled with the St. Louis Blues, who were a very good offensive team and very good at creating high danger chances on them and converting on them, right? Obviously, again, Hellebuck's play style of stepping back, stepping uh, further back into his crease leaves holes that really good shooters can exploit. The Stars are arguably a better offensive team, have better shooters up and down the lineup. Mira Heiskanen is going to have a field day shooting on some Connor Hellebuck, especially the amount of holes he leaves, right? So it'll be interesting to see if there are adjustments made, like we already talked about, Hellebuck making maybe challenging players a little more, and if the Stars can adjust. The key thing for this series for the Jets is to shut down the transition play. We talked at length about how important it is to the Stars game plan, how important it is to Miro Haskin, to Mikko Rantanen, who is the Stars' best player, and that's just what the Jets are going to have to shut down. Because if they can do that, the Stars are a pretty subpar 5-on-5 team overall. Likewise, you also have to look at the power play, and that's where the Stars did a ton of damage against Colorado, and they will do a ton of damage against the Jets at or on the power play if the Stars can't stay disciplined or if they can't shut it down. And a big part of that, again, is going to be the zone entries. If you give Dallas chances to set up, you're going to struggle. You're not going to be able to keep the puck out of the back of your net for very long. So that's the key takeaways I would say for this round in the playoffs. The other X factor for this, I will say, and we talked about it a little bit already, is Jake Ottinger, who was very good in the first round, arguably a better goalie than Hunter Hellebuck was in the first round. But throughout most of the season, it was definitely the second best American goalie behind Hellebuck. So it'd be interesting to see. Again, we talked a little bit about the Olympic implications already. Is this where Ottinger surpasses Hellebuck as the best American goaltender, or at least where he's seen at, or where he can change the perception a little bit? Obviously, Hellebuck was always been the better regular season goalie, but Ottinger has the playoff performances. Obviously, he's one of the best playoff performing goaltenders of the last several years. So that's an interesting thing as well. The goaltender matchup is going to be very fun to watch in this series. Now, moving on, we'll talk about the other West series in Vegas and Edmonton. Now, I'll just give a quick overview of this because we don't have a ton of time left. But there's a really good article written by Bruce Carlock of Oilers Nation. So if you can, go check it out. I'll try and link it in the description of this video. But go check it out. He really breaks down the Vegas game plan and how the Oilers can exploit it. I'm not going to give you a bit of the highlights. Obviously, go read the article and really look at his analysis. But a couple of the big things is that Vegas D zone coverage is aggressive in two different ways. One, it's aggressive when the puck is at the point. They send two guys out and really try to pressure and force turnovers. When they force a turnover, they quickly transition to offense. 4 guys, 5 guys fly the zone, often leading to odd man rushes, which creates a ton of goals for Vegas. The second way it's aggressive is that when the puck's down low is they collapse the slot. They collapse the slot as that box plus one. They clog everything up. Don't let teams get those high danger scoring chances. Now, the important thing, and what Bruce points out in the article, is that when you move the puck really quick, so move it high to low really quick, that opens up space in the high slot. Not so much in the dangerous area, but more the high slot, top of the circles and stuff. And a team like Edmonton, who's really good at attacking downhill, especially a guy like Leon Draisaitl, Evan Bouchard, if they can move the puck from low to high, high to low, very fast, and get the Vegas players moving, especially because Vegas isn't necessarily, while they're aggressive, they're not necessarily a fast team, but just play a very aggressive style, that's going to leave holes there, right? And if you think about it, the puck goes low to high and then quickly high to low. The D are jumping all over the place. Evan Bouchard crashes down the middle, and McDavid finds him in the high slot, and you got a goal, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind for this series. Another thing to keep in mind is the sustained pressure. So Edmonton towards the end of the LA series was really good at just sustaining pressure in the offensive zone. Again, with that quick puck movement. And again, we already talked about how that can exploit Vegas's defensive zone structure. So that's going to be key to them. Can they keep that up? Um, you would hope to see maybe a little bit more of Evan Bouchard, a little less of Darnell Nurse in this capacity. Bouchard's just a much better puck mover. Same with Jake Wallman. I think he's a bit better of a puck mover. Nurse has been good for what he is, but obviously he's limited in some of these areas, especially his mobility and his playmaking ability a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see if we see those guys get a little bit more time just to take advantage of that a little more and to take advantage of the Vegas defensive zone coverage. Big thing for Edmonton, a thing that's going to hurt their chances that Matthias Ekholm still isn't back. If Ekholm's back, the Oilers are heavy favorites because they have a D-core just as good as Vegas is. Without Ekholm, I will say the Vegas D-core is probably better, and that is a little bit scary because Vegas's forwards are also probably deeper, though they do lack a McDavid level player. Eichel's pretty close to like he is absolutely an elite player, but I mean, there's a difference between a 100-point player in Eichel and a 120-point player that McDavid and Draisaitl both are at their peak. It'll be interesting to see. This is going to be a very fun series to watch. I think there's going to be a lot of goals. I mean, you got Aiden Hill and Calvin Pickard in net on either side, and neither of those guys are necessarily elite goaltenders by any means. I know Hill has a cup, but besides that cup run, he's been inconsistent, I'll say. And Calvin Pickard's a career backup. And, we might see Stuart Skinner come back in. I doubt it the way he played. I think Edmonton is going to roll with Pickard unless he gets absolutely blown out. But yeah, that's the big thing. And then we talked a lot about how Edmonton can exploit Vegas. On the flip side, Vegas is going to thrive on their quick strike counterattacks on the offense. So forcing those turnovers, whether it's in the neutral zone or in the defensive zone, and flying up ice and creating those high danger scoring chances off the rush, that's where Vegas is going to thrive. So if that happens, Vegas can take advantage of it. It's over for Edmonton because they won't be able to defend against it. They don't have the goaltending to bail them out, at least as far as I'm concerned. Special teams are going to be very important for this series as well. Vegas obviously has a very good power play. Edmonton does not have a good penalty kill. Like they were really bad in round one against the LA team. So being disciplined is going to be very important because Edmonton's penalty kill really struggled. Darnell Nurse just isn't mobile enough to be a good penalty killer. Be interesting. I think they maybe should try Bouchard in that position just because he's a little more mobile. I know everybody thinks he's a terrible defensive player, but being a 5-on-5 defensive player and killing a penalty are two different skill sets, and mobility is very important for that. So I do think Bouchard should be out there just to add a little more mobility to that penalty kill group, and it could really help him in the series against the Vegas penalty kill. Similarly, Vegas has a pretty good penalty kill, but Edmonton's power play is, when it's firing, one of the elite power plays in the league. And I know it struggled a little bit against LA, but if we can see a return to form for that power play, Vegas is going to really struggle to contain it, as will any team in the league, and that will be huge for Edmonton. Obviously, we saw what a good power play can do for us already in the Stars and Colorado series. Can really fix any 5-on-5 play issues you might have, which Edmonton might run into in this series if they can't get any offense generated against Vegas. But be an interesting series to see. Again, I think this series is probably going to go to 7 games. Right now, I'm slightly leaning Vegas just because looking at their rosters, I think there's just a little more depth at every position there. But it all really depends on the start, how good the star players for Edmonton are, and how much Vegas can contain those star players. Obviously, Eichel and Stone weren't at their absolute best, and they were still able to beat Minnesota. Edmonton is just a better version of Minnesota, basically. Not necessarily a deep team, but a team that has a ton of star power that can score a ton. Vegas, similarly, is just a better version of LA, which Edmonton was able to beat. So it'll be interesting to see that matchup. It's going to be very similar to how the matchup each team faced in the first round. But yeah, going forward, again, I think it's going to be 7 games, and it's really a toss up. But I'm going to slightly lean Vegas for now, just based on the depth of the play. But if Edmonton keeps it up like they played against LA, they're going to be a very hard team to beat. Then yeah, we're going to move on. We'll do the last two series relatively quick because I mean I think these ones are a little easier to predict. The West is a lot more interesting, I think, in this round of the playoffs. Leafs Panthers is interesting, but I do think the Leafs are going to really struggle with the Panthers' forecheck. When I look at Toronto, when I look at their style of play, it's not quite similar to Tampa, I would say, but in general, like when you're under pressure, flipping the puck out of the zone, making a safe play, and then trying to force those 50-50 battles in the neutral zone, that's something Tampa likes to do a lot, and Toronto does it even more. And Florida was really good at just picking that up and sustaining the pressure on Tampa, and that was a huge part of why Tampa really struggled. So I think it's going to be Florida in 6. We can get a little ahead of ourselves on that. I just think Florida, star power wise, is right there with Toronto. Obviously, Barkov and Reinhardt are going to match up a ton against the Marner Matthews line. And that's not good for Toronto because that's like those are already two guys that have a history of struggling to perform in the playoffs. And now they're going to have to go against the best defensive line in the league, against one of the best forechecking teams in the league, and try to perform. And the issues with Toronto's back end not being overly mobile or overly offensive focused are really going to hurt them because they're not going to be able to generate offense off the rush in the way a team like Tampa should have been able to. And like Toronto's arguably going to be worse than Tampa in that regard. And we already saw how Florida was able to dominate a Tampa Bay team that is a much better offensive team in that regard and just basically cause the offense to dry up, right? Toronto's going to struggle even more. This series will be a bit more of a defensive battle because Toronto is a good defensive team, don't get me wrong. But Florida's forecheck is just so good at causing those gaps in coverage and those breakdowns in coverage that result in those broken plays and end up in the back of your net. So, again, I think Florida, their forechecking is the best in the league. Their overall coverage is just too much. Toronto's really going to struggle. If Toronto wants to win, their stars have to show up, and we know how that works out historically for Toronto. So I don't see it happening, but I'll give it Florida in 6 games. I think Toronto can maybe make it interesting, but I don't see Toronto taking this one. It's just there's too much, right? Basically, for this to be a win, the Matthews line has to outplay the Barkov line, and I don't know about you, I don't see it happening. So it'd be interesting to see, anyways. But yeah, that's my take on that series. And then finally, Carolina, Washington. Again, relatively quick. These teams are very similar. Two very deep teams that lack a true game-breaking talent. That being said, Sebastian Aho will probably be the best player in this series. Andrei Svechnikov was very good in the first round. He also is somebody that could be the best player in the series. And there's an outside chance Alex Ovechkin is the best player in this series. He was the best in the first round series against Montreal for sure. Um, a big part of the Canes' success in round one was their counterattack, and very similar to how Vegas plays, very aggressive in the neutral zone and in the defensive zone, forcing turnovers and then attacking with odd man rushes the other way. The Canes were very good at that, especially a guy like Logan Stankoven was very good for Carolina for that reason. Created a ton of chances, didn't necessarily convert on all of them, but he created a ton of chances. Look for him to potentially have a breakout series here because he was already very good in the first round and it just didn't end with a lot of pucks in the back of the net. He could really come alive here in this series. Um, and Washington's depth was absolutely on full display in the first round. It felt like every series, a different line was the best line of that, or every game, a different line was the best line for them. And so that's going to have to continue to be the case here. They need to be able to roll 4 lines that are going to be strong offensive options and then just rely on some of their star players to hopefully put the puck in the back of the net. Um, Again, I am leaning Carolina again because I think their depth is just a little bit better than Washington's and their star players. Maybe not necessarily better, but they're younger and a little more proven as far as recent history is concerned. But yeah, this is the battle for who's going to be second place in the East because again, I think Florida is just going to run away with the East at this point. But regardless, this is going to be a very fun series to watch. I think it goes 7 games. They're just so evenly matched at basically every position. Besides the fact that like Jacob Slavin is the best defenseman in this series and like Sebastian Aho is probably the best forward, these teams are very evenly matched up and down the lineup. So yeah, that's my take. Anyways, again, I think Carolina in 7. It's a bit of a coin flip series, but I do think Carolina is the better team overall, at least on paper. It'll be fun to watch. And I mean, personally, rooting for Washington. You want to see Ovi have one more run, right? Obviously, he's already won a cup, but seeing him have another deep playoff run would be very exciting and a little nostalgic, especially for myself. So yeah, it's going to be very fun. And yeah, round 2 is shaping up to be very exciting. I have Leafs Panthers going 6. The rest of the series, I think, are going to go 7 games. So will be a lot of fun for sure. But anyways, with that, we've gone on long enough and had some recording issues earlier, so I've been trying to get this podcast done for about 2 hours now. So I am exhausted and my voice is starting to hurt. So I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you guys all for listening to the Ice Vision podcast. Check us out on Twitter. Check us out on YouTube as well. I'm posting a lot of videos there and a lot of extra stuff as well on YouTube. A lot of smaller, shorter form content, hopefully. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys all for tuning in to the Ice Vision podcast, and we'll see you all in the next episode.